Welcome back to Beelzebub the Jag. I'm just beginning another one of my mammoth 200-mile drives. This time I'm heading from Nottingham back home to Brighton. Take about 4 hours. But, if you've seen the previous films, you'd have noticed in the last couple of days I spent quite a bit of time cleaning the electrics in the engine bay, the contacts, the wiring, the relays, etc. I did have a starting issue last weekend, cold starting, and it seems much better now. It was quite a few hours. I actually spent 5 hours on Tuesday and 5 hours on Wednesday, and I've probably only done a quarter of the electrical contacts in the whole car. I've just sort of worked on the starting sequence in the engine bay, the cold start injector and the thermo time switch, etc. Just cleaned everything. I've not done anything to do with the air conditioning or the lighting, or they will all need cleaning in due course. But the car seems, it starts perfectly now, very, very quickly. Within the split second of touching the key, there's no sort of long cranking. So there very well could have been dirty connections to the cold start injector or the thermo time switch, which it engages the cold start injector. But I'm just pleased that it's worked. But what I wanted to talk about today, LPG, Liquid Petroleum Gas. Many of you will already know this car is converted to run on LPG. And I do get quite a lot of critical messages coming from people that being polite, they're sort of ignorant of the facts. There's one or two people who are really rather sort of terse and, sort of say, how can you be so ridiculous running a beautiful car, a beautiful engine on such ridiculous fuel? It was never designed to, you're going to knacker up your engine, you're going to have no power. I don't share that view, and I would suggest that those people have never experienced or driven a car that's correctly converted. I dare say they've driven one that's badly converted, and it's like anything. If somebody's done badly, it's a horror show. And when I bought this car, it was already converted to LPG. It had been disconnected, and when I bought it, I got it reconnected, and I found out why it had been disconnected. It was a nightmare. It was truly dreadful. It couldn't run. It just farted and shuddered, and it was intolerable. So that's why it was disconnected. So I literally had a specialist, a guy called Neil Mugglestone. He's specialised and developed, fitting of LPG systems for a long time, and he's one of the few people that can actually make a V12 engine run properly on LPG. There's no kit available. What you need is, they've got like an ECU. They go up to 8 cylinders, V8s, but there's so few V12s, there is not a company that produces a V12 ECU for LPG. And what Neil can do is sort of adjust and splice 2 6-cylinder ones together and make it run magnificently. And I insisted that Neil did the LPG on this car, and it's been amazing. And there's so many benefits. The only disadvantage, well, there's 2 disadvantages. Firstly, buying the LPG, not everywhere sells it, so you've got to sort of choose your locations where you buy it. And the second one is you have to carry a tank, and the tank takes up a bit of space. But apart from that, they're the only 2 negatives and disadvantages. My main reason for running it is cost. I've just filled up on LPG, and I've just paid 63 pence a litre for the LPG here in the UK. And petrol at that very same station is £1.47 a litre, and diesel is £1.49. So it's less than half the price. So there's a cost thing. But if it's properly set up like this one is, with a modern injected system, it runs so smooth. It's on this car, on petrol it's very smooth, but you get a slight thrum of the straight 6 engine, which is perfectly normal. On a V12, they are much more silent than this, but this one achieves closer to V12 levels of silence and refinement running on LPG. Now, there's a reason why. LPG, it's stored as a gas under great pressure. It's minus 50 degrees. And you don't need a pump. You do not need a fuel pump. So because it's under pressure, it feeds itself into what's called, in the engine bay, it's called a reducer or a vaporizer. And it's quite small. It's, I don't know, maybe 4 inches across, something like that. It's like a cylinder type thing, and one side of it is spliced into the cooling system. So it's got the warm coolant from the engine running through it, and the other side you've got a chamber whereby the liquid gas feeds itself under pressure, and when it reaches that chamber, if the engine's warm with warm water running through it, the gas vaporizes, and it's then fed to the injectors as a vapor, not as a liquid, and the injectors inject directly into the inlet manifold, into the air intake. So it is injected into there as a vapor. Now petrol, when it's run on petrol, it's liquid and it's under pressure from the fuel pump. And it's injected. Petrol injection is injected as a mist, as a liquid mist into the. It's like atomized, but it's still a liquid into the air intake chamber. So it goes in there wet. It isn't a vapor. And it in the time it's in the air intake and reaching the cylinders, hopefully the petrol becomes a vapor. Now, when it hits the cylinder, not all of the petrol is actually vaporized. Some of it is still atomized as a liquid, and that doesn't really burn very efficiently at all. You get a lot of waste. With LPG, because it's already vaporized when it hits the air intake, it's 100% vaporized by the time it's in the cylinder. You get 100% efficiency of burn, and you also need a slightly lesser compression. And it's just so smooth, and you get a more efficient burn. It's really quite wonderful. I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're in the UK where you can buy the stuff half price or less than half price of petrol. If it's properly fitted, it's so smooth, and it's slightly thick and sticky, a little bit like diesel in consistency. It's not as fluid as petrol. But it does, honestly, it vaporizes beautifully itself. It just warms up from the heat from the engine, but that also helps the engine to run cooler. This is minus 50 degrees, the liquid, when it goes into the vaporizer, and that takes some of the excess heat from the engine. It keeps which is in the summer months. So if you're in heavy traffic in summer months, when the sun's beating down, you're looking at the needle rise and you're thinking, oh my goodness me. On LPG you don't get that, because if you flip over onto petrol, because of course the car will run on petrol, or if it runs out of LPG and then suddenly starts running in heavy traffic, in heavy sunshine, you'll notice the temperature rises dramatically. That never ever happens on LPG. The LPG helps it to run a lot cooler. There's so many reasons, and as I say to you, the only negative for me is not being able to buy it as easily as petrol, and just it takes up a little bit of space. But I would never run on petrol again. It just runs beautifully. This car is definitely dramatically smoother and quieter, and it's massively more efficient on the LPG. You just get a much more efficient burn. So people do criticise it, and it sort of irritates me. Was it Richard Hammond in the UK? He a while ago made a video, or actually it was a TV program. I forget what it was now. Might have been Top Gear, and he was very, very critical of LPG. And to be honest with you, he is absolutely ignorant, and what he says is completely untrue. And people watch those sort of things, and that forms their opinion. The truth is they've never driven one that's properly converted and properly sorted like this, and it's just a dream. It really is. It makes a magnificent car even better. This car runs beautifully on petrol, but honestly, truly, it's even smoother on LPG, and there's no noticeable loss in power. You really can't tell the difference. And now, if it was driven under test conditions on a track with a race driver, and being properly timed, maybe there would be a slight difference in time, in performance, but believe me, in normal swift road conditions you cannot tell the difference. There's no noticeable loss of power. If there is any loss, it's certainly less than 5%. Possibly, but I dare say there is no loss of power. It wouldn't surprise me if it was the same, or even equally, it wouldn't surprise me if there was due to the efficiency in burn, there was a slight increase in power. But no, LPG, honestly, it's wonderful, and given the mileage I do, up to 1,000 miles a week, and this car averages around about 12 to the gallon. As you can imagine, trying to run such a thing on petrol would be prohibitive. But given the half-price fuel costs and the increase in mileage per gallon, it makes running this old beast perfectly viable. You know, the mileage I do. You know, if you're only going to drive maybe a couple of thousand a year and it's a second car, it's not worth spending £2,500 plus for the conversion. But you know, you know, within 3 months or so, I saved the on the fuel savings. I've recouped the cost of the you know, the fitment, the installation. So, you know, never dismiss LPG. Personally, I very much recommend it.